On a scorching afternoon, heat waves shimmered over the blacktop of the back road as 10-year-old Emily Young walked home from school. She slowed when she spotted a red Shelby GT 500, hood up, stalled on an empty stretch. Beside it, a white man in a flawless suit paced in circles, yelling into his phone. "I paid a fortune for this car and now I'm stranded. I've got to meet the governor today," he raged. Emily almost kept going. Aunt Renee always said never talk to strangers, especially ones who looked that out of place in their mostly black rural community 2 hours from Boston. But his frustration was almost tangible. She hitched up her beat-up backpack, stuffed with books and, more importantly, the wrench kit Uncle Leon said was as essential as math, and walked over. "Mind if I take a look?" she offered, with the confidence of someone who'd already swapped belts in her uncle's shop. The executive sized her up, hesitant, but time was ticking. He stepped aside. Emily ducked under the hood and in just a few minutes found the loose cable jamming the ignition. She left the engine purring and wiped her hands on the hem of her uniform. That's when the sun flashed off a silver ring on her finger, engraved with a crest. The man went pale. The thing he'd been hunting for years was on the slim wrist of this kid, holding secrets that could turn his life upside down. "Good afternoon, sir," Emily said, appearing beside the convertible on the shoulder. "Need some help?" Evan Hammond looked up, annoyed by the smoke drifting from the engine. When he saw the skinny teenager, colored braids swinging over an oversized MIT t-shirt, he managed a smile that was half surprise, half sneer. "Thanks, but this is a racing machine. I need a real mechanic." Emily didn't budge. She dropped her pack on the pavement, wiped her hands on her shorts, and popped the hood with a sure motion. "I've spent every vacation in my uncle's garage as long as I can remember. If you want to skip the tow truck, I can take a look." Evan checked his watch. The road was still empty. He nodded. "When did the engine start overheating?" she asked, feeling the hoses. "About 40 minutes ago," he said, arms crossed, part skeptical, part curious. Emily tightened a clamp, tested the belt, and shook her head. "Found the culprit. Circulation's blocked by this cheap little part. Give me 5 minutes and the engine will be purring again." Evan blinked, impressed by her confidence, and by the fact she knew his last name. Standing there in the afternoon sun, the powerful businessman realized his luck might depend on the smallest person on the highway. "Do you smell something sweet, kind of like syrup?" Evan, still holding the lug wrench, frowned. "Now that you mention it, yeah. Where's it coming from?" Emily pointed at the dark pavement. "Cooling system. See that shiny puddle? Fluid leaked out, engine boiled over." The explanation sounded simple, but the methodical way she broke down every detail held his attention. There was something familiar in that focused look, the decisive vibe of someone who knows exactly what they're after. Evan shook his head, trying to remember where he'd seen that same intensity before. "What's your name?" "Emily. Emily Young." She stuck out a grease-stained hand. He shook it, still surprised. "Evan Hammond." Wasting no time, the girl opened her backpack and pulled out a metal case. "Uncle Leon insists I carry an emergency kit. Long roads charge a toll on people who aren't ready." Evan leaned against the fender and watched. Emily found the split in the hose, wiped off the excess fluid, and wrapped sealing tape with almost choreographed precision. While the adhesive settled, she explained, "It'll hold till we hit the next town. Once you're there, top off the water and coolant before the needle climbs again." The engine still pinged under the hot hood. Evan felt the trip that seemed derailed was back on track. More than that, he wanted to figure out why this teenager, who'd appeared out of nowhere on the shoulder, looked so familiar. And more importantly, how she'd learned to handle machines like she was decoding a personal secret. Evan was just sliding his subway ticket through the turnstile when something flashed beside him. Emily tossed back her hair and on her pinky, an old ring caught the light. The oval emerald revealed under the polished glass a crescent moon flaw. The sight knocked the breath from Evan's lungs. 12 years earlier, at the Little Angels orphanage, he had placed that very ring into a little girl's hands. Time seemed to fold in on itself. With a voice he barely recognized, he asked, "That ring, it's unique." Emily lowered her gaze, turning the piece, held by a thread so it wouldn't slip off. "It belonged to my adoptive mom, Lauren. She passed last year. She said it stood for a promise I'd understand one day." Promise. The word echoed between them, Evan, fighting off an avalanche of memories, ventured, "Do you know where she got it?" "I never got more than hints. She just kept saying it had belonged to someone special." A heavy silence settled in, packed with unspoken questions. To dodge it, Evan offered to drive her home. Emily hesitated, then accepted with a tight smile. On the way, buildings slid past like pages flipping too fast. He asked about school, how long she'd lived in the city, who'd taken care of her after Lauren's passing. "I stay with Aunt Renee and Uncle Leon," she said, absent-mindedly spinning the ring. They opened their doors when everything changed. The tiny moon inside the gem flashed, reminding Evan that some stories never end. They just wait for the right moment to come back into the light. Evan kept his tone casual, though his fingers clenched the wheel. "Have you lived here since you were little?" he asked, eyes on the road. Emily frowned, digging up buried memories. "Since I was 3. Before that, Lauren hardly talks about it. She only said she adopted me from an orphanage called Little Angels. It closed soon after." The name hit Evan like a jolt. The car even swerved. "Little Angels? You're sure?" "Positive. Why? Ever heard of it?" He smiled without showing teeth, trying to steady his pulse. "Yeah, a long time ago." Silence stretched until, at the end of the street, a tidy little house appeared. Evan pulled over, killed the engine, and turned to her. "Emily, if you ever need anything, call me," he said, handing her a card. She took the shiny rectangle in surprise. It felt out of place in a sedan worth more than every house on the block combined. Thanked him and hopped out, the polished junk ring she wore glinting in the afternoon sun. From the porch she waved, unaware he was still watching in the rearview mirror. When the door closed, Evan let out the breath he'd been holding. His shaky hand unlocked his phone. Time to call the private detective. The puzzle he'd tried to forget was moving again, and at the center of it was that black girl who could bring dead clocks, busted toys, and maybe buried memories back to life. An emerald ring Evan had left with little Emily when he promised to come back for her was back at the center of everything 12 years later. After 3 sleepless nights, he blew up every photo of the jewel, trying to figure out how it surfaced at an underground auction linked to his last name. In the glass office of Hammond Enterprises, piles of contracts covered the desk. Among them lay the deed to the Little Angels orphanage, bought by his father James, for next to nothing right before Evan became CEO. His assistant's voice cut the hush. "Mr. Hammond, Evans from Legal is here with the Horizon Project file. Luxury towers would rise where kids once played." Evan shoved confidential reports into a drawer seconds before the lawyer walked in. "Your father demanded total secrecy on this purchase," Evans warned, dropping the folder. Evan replied without changing his tone. "I'm the one calling the shots now." Alone again, he opened the folder and found transfers to ghost accounts and, worse, a list showing where every child ended up after the shelter closed. Emily Young's name was highlighted in red. "Special case, contact HW." His phone buzzed. Ramirez, the investigator, muttered, "Found Lauren Young, Emily's mom. She died in an accident last year. Brake failure, looks fishy." Evan's stomach dropped. "And the adoption records?" he whispered, knowing the truth could threaten more than his legacy. "So she just vanished from the files?" Evan frowned. "I want every detail on the family that took this girl in." That same morning, far away, the rhythmic click of a wrench echoed in the workshop behind Emily's light blue house. Among oil cans and scattered parts, it was her safe harbor. Circuit logic made sense when the rest of the world felt messy. "Got the old guy running?" Leon asked, wiping his hands on his coveralls. Emily lifted the 1954 radio, now humming softly. "Just had to solder the right wires," she said, pleased with the hiss coming from the speaker. Her uncle grinned and tousled her braids. "That talent didn't come out of nowhere. You talk to machines like they're people." The young woman drew a deep breath. "Think my mom would be proud?" "Lauren? She'd be cheering her lungs out," Leon assured her. Emily turned the ring engraved with initials she'd never really understood. "Yesterday, some rich guy got stranded on the road. I fixed his car and he recognized this piece," she said, showing the ring. The color drained from her uncle's face. "Who?" "Evan Hammond," she replied, handing him a black card with silver letters. Leon went rigid, eyes distant. At that moment, Renee appeared in the doorway, voice firm but calm. "Emily, honey, remember we promised to explain everything about Lauren when the time was right?" Well, that moment just knocked on our door. When night wrapped the house, Emily understood why Lauren's silence had weighed so much. The nurse who'd raised her sat beside her and, almost in a whisper, said she'd run off with her the night the Little Angels orphanage shut down without warning. Since then, they'd changed names, cities, even accents so they wouldn't be found. At that moment, Renee appeared holding a yellowed envelope, its old seal still intact. "Your mother entrusted this to us," she said, placing the paper in the girl's trembling hands, "and insisted it be delivered only when a Hammond showed up." The handwriting was unmistakable. "My dear Emily, if these lines have reached you, it means you're no longer alone. There are truths that need to come to light." While Emily tried to decipher every word, tension spread across the city. In Evan Hammond's apartment, Ramirez called again. "Sir, reporter Marcus Hayes is sniffing around the Little Angels case. He suspects your father's interest in kids with unusual talents." The next morning, a black SUV pulled up in front of the school. 2 men in suits checked a photograph. "Is that the girl with the emerald ring?" "That's her. Mr. Hammond wants to see her now." Across the street, Leon watched everything. He dialed the emergency number Lauren had left. "Hayes, it's about Little Angels and the girl with the ring. I found the proof you're looking for." Evan barely had time to stand when his father burst into the boardroom at Hammond Enterprises. James had stepped off the jet moments earlier, unannounced, carrying nothing but urgency in his eyes. "What's this about going over the Angels' papers?" he growled. "I thought that chapter was buried." Evan took a deep breath. "I found Emily Young, the girl with the emerald ring." "So what? Project Horizon is in the home stretch. Every hour costs billions." "She's not just any orphan," he replied, steady. "She fixes machines that take engineers days to figure out. She sees gears like they're an open book." James raised an eyebrow, already counting profits. "Patents, military contracts, market domination. We bought that orphanage for exactly that." While father and son squared off, Emily, on the other side of town, opened a letter that smelled of storage. It was from Lauren, the nurse who had vanished years before. The lines revealed the ring wasn't just an heirloom. It was the key to digital vaults with evidence capable of blowing up empires, including the Hammonds. At 10, Emily understood circuits better than feelings, but she recognized danger when the stone grew cold in her hand. The corporation was sharpening its teeth. The girl was gathering courage. And Evan, in the glass-walled office on the 30th floor, realized the next choice wouldn't fit into balance sheets or risk reports. The clock on the wall read 11 o'clock when the 53rd floor conference room at Hammond Enterprises boiled over. Directors exchanged tense looks as James Hammond, with a single tap on the glass table, imposed silence. "Where's my son? Evan was supposed to be here an hour ago." The elevator doors opened before anyone could answer. Evan crossed the carpet unhurriedly, followed by a woman in a dark suit. "Sorry I'm late, Dad. This is Federal Prosecutor Claire Bennett. She wants to talk about Project Prometheus." The name hit like lead. Some executives stepped back, others held their breath. James paled but kept his chin up. "Are you out of your mind?" he snarled. Evan was already hooking his laptop to the panel. The giant screen sprang to life with folders and photos. "For years we hid this," he said, voice steady. "Little Angels and the other institutes you shut down weren't philanthropy. They were labs where 48 children were mapped, tested, and groomed for purposes they never agreed to." The lights dimmed to a faint glow, forcing every face to confront the files. ID numbers, medical reports, aptitude assessments. The truth needed no adjectives. James clenched his fists but found no words. The prosecutor stood still, waiting for the confirmation that would make it all official. Evan now had the whole room as an audience, exactly what he needed for the next step. James drew a deep breath to stay in control. "You stole classified material," he accused, keeping his voice level. "That's corporate espionage." Evan lifted the folder. "I grabbed proof of something far worse. Illegal tests on minors, forged adoption records, payoffs, threats." The big screen lit up. In the images, Nurse Lauren Young slipped away in the dead of night with a little girl in her arms. Then came James himself instructing security guards, "Find her. The child has high military value, don't lose her." Evan didn't back down. After that night, 3 employees from the Little Angels orphanage died in convenient accidents. One of them was Lauren's brother, who dared to ask questions. James opened his mouth to argue, but the revolving doors moved before a sound came out. Emily Young crossed the lobby accompanied by her Uncle Leon and Marcus Hayes, a reporter for the Boston Globe. Evan bowed to her. "You didn't have to put yourself at risk." "Yes, I did." Emily's voice was calm, anchored by memories. "My mom swore that one day I'd face the people responsible for our escape." James scanned her from head to toe. The initial shock gave way to a cold calculation. "So this is the prodigy from Project 17, he murmured, as if appraising a rare artifact. "I didn't expect you to be so small." The silence that followed sucked the air out of the room. The next word felt like it could blow everything up. The studio lights reflected on Emily's face as she leaned over the table. "You killed my mother," she said. "Her brakes didn't fail by accident." James Hammond let out a short laugh, wearing his usual confidence. "Proof?" he mocked. "One phone call from me and it all disappears." Emily pulled the emerald ring that had belonged to Lauren from her backpack, twisted the stone, and revealed a tiny memory module. She kept copies here of every Little Angels file, meetings with military doctors, reports on using kids with special abilities and missions. The tycoon went mute. Marcus Hayes pointed to the camera on top of the tripod. "We're live. More than 10,000 people are watching." The chat blew up with angry messages. Evan, James's son, stepped up and spoke quietly. "I took the prosecutor's deal. Full cooperation in exchange for immunity. The jury will take care of you." The doors swung open and federal agents came in. Handcuffed, James stared at Emily. The smile was gone. She held the device like a legacy. "Broken machines can be fixed," she said calmly. "Broken people have to fix themselves. Maybe you'll find the time where you're going." James was led away in cuffs while reporters narrated in real time. The implosion of the empire he had sworn was unshakable. In the days that followed, the stock ticker showed Hammond Enterprises in free fall. Every percentage point exposed years of secret experiments, silent bribes, crooked contracts. Evan watched the red graph with a lump in his throat. He'd lost his last name, his inheritance, his comfort. But for the first time he felt the weight and worth of walking the straight line. At the first hearing, his father waited behind thick glass. Outside, on the same steps where they had posed for so many official photos, Mia intercepted Evan. The emerald ring flashed in the sun, now a sign of truths laid bare, not silent deals. "And after this?" she breathed, as if afraid to break a fragile silence. Evan lifted his gaze to the concrete and steel facade that still carried the family name. He knew that soon those letters would be stripped off with the same dry clack of screws coming loose. "Then comes the hard part," he said. "We're going to rebuild again. Not buildings, people." The wind carried the echo of receding sirens. In that space between ruins and possibilities, a story with no set script was being born, and no one there had any idea how far that turn could go. 5 years had flown by since Emily Young toppled the Hammonds' castle of lies. That spring morning, soft light streamed through the windows of the brand-new Young Center for Young Inventors, the complex that took the place of the old Little Angel orphanage. The hallways smelled of resin and fresh metal. Emily, now 15, walked the east wing with 3 engineers. "These sensors are still throwing unstable readings," she pointed out, tapping the panel. In seconds, she traced the circuit's weak link, the way she'd once sniffed out a leak in a Mustang radiator. While techs jotted down tweaks, Emily caught the buzz of voices in the glass courtyard. Evan was there talking to a circle of investors. He had traded the suit for jeans, but kept the resolve that had led him to give up his fortune. Every penny funded the Prometheus Initiative, a program built to track down talent where the system only saw stats. "Last quarter, we found 23 young people with off-the-charts potential," he explained. "They all get full scholarships, mentorship, and freedom to create. 0 contracts, 0 exploitation, 0 secrets." Emily smiled at the words, yet her mind was already mapping the next move, turning the center into a global beacon before old enemies regrouped. When the Young Center's glass doors opened, former Hammond Enterprises directors stopped in front of the mural dominating the atrium. Side by side were the photo of the orphanage where it all started, and the headline that rattled Wall Street, Hammond Empire Falls After Teen's Whistle Blow. No one would have recognized Evan in the center shot. The heir who once signed eviction notices now walked narrow halls cataloging social impact projects and writing checks to make amends. Leon, head of engineering, eyed the panel with a half-smile. "Emily files her third patent next week," he said, as if calling a game score. "Harvard, MIT, and Stanford have rung 3 times today." The girl, still under voting age, had become the lab's compass, and every new concept pulled the team farther from its dark past. Hundreds of miles away in a federal prison, James Hammond stared at a bare wall. His posture was still proud, but the suit had become rough fabric, and the phone hadn't rung in months. A guard summed up the routine. "He refuses rehab, swears he'll rebuild everything." It was the voice of someone watching a rerun, sure the ending never changes. Back at the center, the lights dimmed for the very first graduation. 12 kids from forgotten neighborhoods held up their diplomas. Before the final anthem, Emily was called to the stage. The auditorium held its breath, waiting to hear from a future still under construction. "I was 10 when I pulled over on a lonely shoulder and fixed the engine of a stranger's car," Emily said, twisting the emerald ring she now wore as a reminder of what came next. The repair uncovered a web of abuse, but it also opened the door to something nobody saw coming. The crowd held its breath. In the back, Evan quietly wiped his eyes. The girl who had dismantled his old empire had given him something money never could. "My adoptive mom, Lauren, used to say broken machines get fixed with new parts. Broken systems only change when you redesign them," Emily went on. "That's why we're here. We're not patching up a crack. We're raising a completely new structure." The next day, a letter landed on her desk. It was from Taylor Hammond, James's daughter. She had dropped the last name after the scandal and now worked as a federal prosecutor. "We found 5 more orphanages running programs just like Little Angels," it read. "With your testimony and the evidence you provided, we rescued 37 more kids. Some have skills like yours. When you feel it's time, they want to meet you." Emily read it aloud to Evan, Uncle Leon, and Aunt Renee. There was a sense that a cycle had closed. That makeshift wrench on the roadside had only been the first step. Now the path stretched out ahead of them, promising and unpredictable. When the old Young Foundation headquarters turned into a community center, almost nobody noticed. Hallways once reserved for closed-door meetings now hosted open circles. Executive portraits gave way to murals painted by teens. Evan would walk there in the late afternoon and hear a new sound. Light footsteps, unhurried and unafraid. He remembered James, the former president, vowing to carve out a legacy. Carve he did, just not the way he'd imagined. Emily preferred to watch from outside. Through the broad windows, she saw kids running across the lawn, free of hidden scripts. That's where she realized the power so many managers had ignored lived. The chance to rewrite futures without charging anything in return. When Evan came over, she pointed at the scene and whispered, "This is where I discovered where power really lives." As the sun dropped, volunteers raised a new sign on the gate. "Every talent deserves to bloom. Every child deserves freedom." It seemed like a simple gesture, but it marked the end of a model that profited from youthful anxiety and uncertainty. To passers-by, it was just wood and paint. To those who helped flip the script, it was a reminder that entire systems can crumble in the face of small, well-placed acts. Thanks for sticking with me. If this story sparked something in you, drop a comment telling us what small act of courage you plan to put into practice today. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapters of this journey for change. See you next time.